Sue Clark. I'm Director on the Mercy International Board, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the graduation of Cohort 2 of the Mercy Global Action Emerging Leaders Fellowship. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all joining us virtually today, the Mercy International Association Board, congregational leaders, staff, fellows, parents, spouses, partners, and those in Mercy missionaries around the world. In Australia, the US, Ireland, Philippines, Papua New Guinea, Peru, United Kingdom, Canada, Kenya, and more. I would also like to extend a heartfelt welcome to our keynote presenter, Professor Azza Karam. It's an honour for us to have you join us in celebrating the graduation of Cohort 2 of the Mercy Global Action Emerging Leaders Fellows. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, those in which we gather from around the world today. I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and future, and extend my respect to all Indigenous people present today. It's a momentous occasion, both in the life of the graduates before me and the life of Mercy International Association. We acknowledge and celebrate the fellows' achievements over the past year and a half. We recognise your dedication and your achievements in mercy, justice, and leadership. Today's graduation is in hybrid form. We have our graduates and some guests here in the international room at Mercy International Centre. For those on Zoom, as we begin our hybrid ceremony, some brief housekeeping. This is a Zoom meeting as opposed to a webinar. So I ask that you all mute yourselves unless you are speaking. Also, you may find it helpful to view today's graduation in speaker view rather than gallery view, so that you may view the speaker at all times. This is located at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Sister Kate Mining will be providing a Spanish translation of today's ceremony. You may choose your language preference on the button toolbar which says interpretation. The programme for the graduation has been emailed ahead of time and attached in the chat box to follow along. Finally, I would also remind you that this graduation ceremony is being recorded for future sharing and review. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Sister Patricia O'Donovan, CEO of Mercy International, for some opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Sue. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever part of the world you are in. So I'm absolutely thrilled and delighted to have this opportunity to welcome you all here to Catherine's home in Baggot Street. Cave Neither Pointer, 1,000 welcomes to each of you, whether you're gathered here in the international room or watching us virtually. As Sue has already said, today is a momentous occasion, both in the lives of you, the graduates, and in the life of Mercy International Association. And on behalf of MIA, I congratulate you. Listening and being in the company of the graduates over the past few days, I'm deeply touched by your passion and commitment in your desire to make a difference in the world, particularly in the area of global mercy and justice. And this is so evident from your research presentations, which you delivered in this room on Thursday night. I draw confidence that the MED program has equipped and empowered you to be creative and empowering leaders within the mercy framework in our world today. The MED experience has offered and enabled you to see the value of networking and building connections in this task of leadership. This gives me great hope to our world and to MIA, who seeks to increase awareness and experience of global interdependence and interconnectedness. We really believe in the power of networking, collaboration, cooperation for the good of all to face the challenges of our world today. Great possibilities open up through collaboration and networking. Catherine Macaulay understood mercy to be the tender, beating heart of her work with the vulnerable and marginalized. And my wish for you on this, your 11th graduation, is that you will continue to be the tender, beating heart of mercy in responding to the complex needs of our wonderful world and vulnerable earth. May you go forth as boundary-breaking women in mercy, with passion, skill, and courage, in a spirit of collaboration and interconnectedness.
Thank you, Sister Patricia. Thank you. I now invite Sister Paula Thomas from the Federation of the Sisters of Mercy of Great Britain and Director on the Mercy International Association Board to lead us in our invocation. The response is: empower us, move us, bring your justice and mercy.
God, creator of the heavens and earth, we pray for all who will hear the witness of the Mercy Global Action Emerging Leaders Fellows. We have come here to carry forward an age-old struggle, the pursuit of economic and social progress for all people, based on respect for the dignity and value of each. We are here to promote and protect human rights. Empower us, move us, bring us. The faces of the women who are here mirror the faces of the millions and millions who are not. It is our responsibility to make sure that the faces that go unheard will be heard. What Mercy Global Action Emerging Leaders Fellowship promotes is an agenda for women's empowerment in mercy, justice, and leadership. Systems that include and not exclude, and an agenda for development that will empower people, eradicate poverty, create sustainable livelihoods, build stable lives and healthy communities, and promote peace on a long-term basis. We decry decision-making that does not reflect the interests of those affected by those decisions. People who live on the land, the women of the land. Let us pray. O God, creator of the heavens and earth, we pray for all those who witness the leadership of the Mercy Global Action Fellows. Bless us. Help us to see one another through eyes enlightened by understanding and compassion. Release us from prejudice so that we can receive the stories of our sisters with respect and attention. Open our ears to the cries of the suffering world and the healing melodies of peace. Empower us. Move us to be instruments in bringing about your justice and equality everywhere.
Thank you, Sister Paula. I now have the great honour to introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Azza Karam. Azza is Professor of Religion and Development at the University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. She served as a member of the United Nations Secretary-General's High-Level Advisory Board on Effective Multilateralism. From 2019 to 2023, she served as the Secretary-General of Religions for Peace. After 2 decades of serving at the United Nations, she has published widely in several languages on issues of religion, education, gender, conflict, and foreign affairs. As a woman of faith, her passion for human rights, justice, and for sustainable development, and the practice support for the idea that the world will only be a fair place for all when people recognise their co-responsibility and place shared values at the centre of global action, can be said. It is evident that Azza is a woman of deep mercy and justice, and we are delighted she has made time to be our keynote speaker for the graduation of the Mercy Global Action Emerging Leaders Fellowship. Her commitment and courage in civil society, her deep conviction to women's leadership, and the values of dignity, justice, and equality have been a model for what we hope to achieve through the month. Our journey through the fellowship is even more important when courageous conversation and courageous listening is so vital to the future we shape together. Now, please welcome Professor Azza.
Peace be upon you all. I hope you can hear me well enough, and it's okay because I've been struggling just a little bit to hear some of what's been going on, but if you can hear me, then all is well. I just wish to, first of all, express how actually the honor is mine to have this opportunity, to have this invitation to address you all at this Mercy Global Action Emerging Leaders Fellowship, which the purpose of which and the methodology of which I am deeply, deeply impressed by. I honestly believe that every single one of you listening as and at this graduation, but also listening in from the Sisters of Mercy is far more eloquent and far more capable of speaking to you here today. So I am grateful for your patience and your indulgence as I share just a few considerations with you, which are essentially based on some of the experiences over the last 30 plus years of serving in the United Nations system, in academia, in international non-governmental organizations. A sample of ideas and reflections based on this experience. I wish to thank you once again for this very lovely introduction of me, actually, which I wish I could have in writing so that I can use elsewhere. Very kind. Thank you. Let me just give you a bit of a heads up on what I want to share with you here today. I will start off with trying to explain to you the terminology that I'm using, because we often, especially in international contexts, assume that we understand the same things as long as we speak the same language. And very often I have learned that sometimes even if people understand the same thing with the same words, the reaction to it and the historical context in their minds, and sometimes even in their own lived experience, can be extremely different. So bear with me as I seem to iterate rather the obvious. I also want to share a few highlights of this learning that I believe we are constantly doing in our life through my career. Not to be facetious, but rather to try to express a certain context of pragmatism and humor. I do share a sense of wonder at the journeys and the encounters I am about to share with you by using quotes from Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. It isn't because I think this to be a sacred text, but seriously, I do think that the contextual background of a wee bit of humor mixed with wisdom never really hurts. So when it comes to terminology, what do I really mean by religions in this particular context? Oh, I neglected to tell you that the title is Mercy is Faiths Working Together for the Common Good. Right. So what do I mean by the context of faiths, or specifically religions here? I intend to refer to the realms of which include religious leaders, religious institutions, religious communities, and religiously inspired non-governmental organizations. Clearly, each of these realms are actually rather vast. And so it's often, if not always, difficult to speak of in any of them in universalized, generalized, and most certainly we end up essentializing these terms. The mistake is often made to speak of religion and development, religion and gender, religion and environment, religion and foreign policy, etc. And this form of essentialization creates multiple opportunities for misunderstanding, especially, albeit not only obviously, when implicit or explicit references are made to things like fundamentalism, terrorism, political violence, etc. In other words, the terms we use are often a little bit warbled and can lead to misunderstandings, because in some contexts, religion is seen as a securitized aspect linked to either aspects of security, terrorism, or immigration, and therefore not always necessarily understood in the full context of faith. Bear with me, therefore, again, as I actually will commit this somewhat essentializing use of the term. But I am trying to nuance through the different experience. As a development practitioner, which basically means someone who worked on designing and implementing projects on health, education, democratization, women's rights, all the things that the wonderful Sisters of Mercy do and contextualize and serve. But I speak from that context of having worked in those spaces as a development practitioner, but also as a former diplomat and a scholar of religion and development. I've often tried, rather unsuccessfully, to both think of what I'm doing as well as actually do what I need to do. Now, please note that the context and the emphasis is on unsuccessfully. So what do I mean by the common good, which, remember, is one of the themes of the title? Now, it would be sort of common sense to understand what the common good is. But nevertheless, again, I say, please allow me to explain what and how I understand this term. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, the common good is that which benefits society as a whole, and it stands in contrast to the private good of individuals and certain sections of society. It is often used in the context of political philosophy or politics, political actions. The idea of the common good has pointed toward the possibility that certain goods, such as security and justice, can be achieved only through citizenship, collective action, and active participation in the public realm of politics and public service, which is fine generally, except that as some of the research that has been presented and much of the data around us shows, the actions, the understanding of citizenship itself is extraordinarily limiting, especially at a time when there's over 100 million forcibly displaced people in today's world. That's 100 million without citizenship. But let me go back to the common good. The notion of the common good is a denial that society is and should be composed of atomized individuals living in isolation from one another. Instead, its proponents have asserted that people can and should live their lives as citizens deeply embedded in social relationships. And if we look at the definition of the common good in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, we realize that there's an expansion, there's a slightly more elaborate notion of what the common good is, which is the understanding that it can include road systems, public parks, police protection, courts, public schools, museums, cultural institutions, public transportation, civil liberties, such as the freedom of speech and the freedom of association, even the system of property, and clean air, clean water, all of these become public goods. And before we get carried away with the common sense of it all, let's take a sneak peek at real-world dynamics. The challenge of realizing the global public good is very real. We're not talking today of what's only relevant in any one country. As all of you have shown, the graduates have shown through their multiple research, there is a incredible interconnectedness of concerns, of issues, and of lived realities. The global public good, therefore, is not a matter of what happens in one nation, but the global public good, like the air and the water, is everybody's business, and serving it is not limited to the citizenship of any one nation. But let's also reflect a little bit on what the world's largest international financial institution, the International Monetary Fund, what do they say about public goods? According to them, public goods should be available to all. Therefore, this notion of non-excludable. They can be repeatedly enjoyed by anyone without diminishing the benefits they deliver to others. And this is the non-rival. So public goods, global public goods, are not excludable and non-rival. Now, I quote, "The scope of public goods can be local, national, or global because they encompass many aspects of our lives, from a national environment, our histories and cultures, and technological progress down to everyday devices, even metric systems." I live in America, you live in Dublin. If you start talking meters and I start talking feet, I don't know if we'll quite understand each other, but such is the global system. But we're also warned the public goods are universally undersupplied. Why? Because whether at the national, regional, and especially the global level, the ethos of profit, whether governmental or non-governmental, but also especially the private sector, the ethos of profit is extremely determinant. Those who either supply or care for public goods often do not do so in perpetuity. Think about it for a second. A political party elected into government will only look after the public good, the provision of public goods in a certain way, usually that's how it gets elected, as long as it serves those in that government. Political parties, even in the world's most accountable democracies, very rarely go beyond their term, or the interest that they seek rarely goes beyond the terms that they serve. This is global politics. And this is the politics that normally, on an everyday basis around us, determines our ability to safeguard, let alone to provide, the global public good. Now, let me divert for a second to look at the way that interfaith or multi-faith efforts work. But first, I share with you that the understanding of interfaith organizations and initiatives is often those that are made up of representatives of different religious, either institutions or communities, or even religious individuals, essentially seeking to work together, either at the most senior leadership level or the grassroots community level. Often they include youth, women, and they often separate youth and women for some reason, or both and all. Interfaith organizations or multi-faith organizations work nationally, regionally, globally on different development projects and programs, including, obviously, issues of poverty eradication, religious education, environment, children's rights, peacemaking, and so on. Many of the issues that this cohort has addressed so beautifully. Some of these interfaith or multi-faith organizations work with governments, some do not. Few, like Religions for Peace, the organization I had the privilege to serve until very recently, few work with humanitarian efforts together. In other words, humanitarian efforts are often the work or the business of single religion actors. Very rarely are they the effort of multi-faith actors, which is why I'm grateful I had the opportunity to set up the only multi-faith humanitarian fund in April of 2023 at the height of the global COVID crisis and lockdown. keep this point in mind, this idea of working together, as opposed to each religion and religious institution or religious NGO doing their own incredible work. The truth also is that today there's virtually a new interfaith or multi-faith effort taking place in some part of the world almost on a daily basis. So it's a growing field and space. The sites of interfaith work are becoming increasingly populated. Although, as with the case of the United Nations over the years, as the UN itself grew to encompass so many different organizations, including the World Bank Group, including WHO, the World Health Organizations, all of this is part of the United Nations system. But the larger the system, the more the efforts has yet to translate into a better safeguarding or serving of the public good. So let me now help you work with me to think about the global public good as an aspect of universal peace. And what do I mean by universal peace? In the United Nations Charter, Article 1, where actually the purpose of the United Nations itself is identified, notes, and I quote, "Global peace is to develop friendly relations among nations based on respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples, and to take other appropriate measures to strengthen universal peace. To achieve international cooperation in solving international problems of an economic, social, cultural, or humanitarian character, and in promoting and encouraging respect for human rights and for fundamental freedoms for all without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion." Effectively, per the definition of the Charter, universal peace is to be a center for harmonizing the actions of nations, now remember we're talking about the United Nations, in the attainment of these common ends. In other words, you can argue quite powerfully that public good, the global common good, is universal peace. And it requires cooperation because it's about solving those shared, interconnected, and interlinked issues and problems and challenges with a view to benefiting all without distinction. Okay, so now let me please share with you a few of my own biases, where I come from. What do I think? Why am I talking about this now? From what perspective? By the way, I'm very encouraged to share this with you because I've had the privilege of listening to some of the presentations by the Peace Fellows, and I realized it's okay to share where one comes from and what one does. Not only what one is thinking. So thank you and chapeau to all of you for that. It takes a certain amount of courage to place oneself in a context of trying to explain general things around us. I understand and I approach the work of mercy as enabled essentially through interreligious cooperation and partnerships between both secular and diverse religious actors. A partnership, a collaboration that is geared towards around protection of the common good. Serving to realize, protect, and serve the common good is a task which I actually believe we are all obligated to undertake by our respective faith traditions or belief systems. So serving the common good is not only the purview of a Muslim or a Jew or a Hindu or a Buddhist or a Catholic. It is what actually all our faiths indeed obligate, if not compel us to serve. No faith says work only for those who believe like you do, or believe in what you do, or believe how you do. I therefore see the United Nations, particularly through the prism of its work in and with religion, which is where I served, and the interfaith work carried out by diverse faith organizations, to be important influencers and detractors of the multi-religious efforts necessary to safeguard the common good. So while I believe firmly in the values of the United Nations, what it upholds, defends, and seeks to implement, those are fundamentally universal human rights, I also believe that these values are inherent in each and every faith tradition. And indeed, had we not had the diversity of faith traditions and values, and especially the common values to all of them, we wouldn't have been able to have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So to many people, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is sometimes seen as almost as sacred as all religions together. Put that aside for a second. So therefore, whether it's the United Nations with its secular governmental emphasis or interfaith and multi-faith non-governmental work, both together can be a very powerful force for the realization of and the protection of the common good. Now, as someone who considers herself to be a wounded veteran of much of the work of international diplomacy and public service, let me share a few ideas with you, which are not scientifically studied and well researched like all that has been presented through the work of the researchers, the young emerging leaders and fellows. But it is actually a description of what I have seen and lived in the so-called Global South, which, by the way, never includes Australia and New Zealand. The Global South always includes the developing world, not the so-called developed world. I actually think that the bulk of the work of multi-religious collaboration tends to be seriously understudied anyway. But we'll get to that perhaps later. To frame these understandings, we need to reflect a little bit on what does religion have to do with it. And here, the opening quote is when Alice says, "Curiouser and curiouser." We know that when governments come together in the United Nations, there isn't always agreement, and it's probably one of the biggest understatements of the year. But we also know that they did agree on the Sustainable Development Goals, which many of you actually address and reference and cross-reference in your work. Therefore, given that 193 governments actually came up together and agreed and vouched not only for 17 Sustainable Development Goals, but for 169 indicators thereof, should tell us something about the magnitude of this moment, this product, this vision, which is sustainable development, and especially the Sustainable Development Goals. You see, this is a wonderful reflection and encompassing effectively of the global common good. If you're wondering what the global common good would look like, if you're wondering how that global common good could be achieved and what the indicators of the achievement is, you look at the Sustainable Development Goals agenda as one of the key definers. But why would the UN or even any governmental or intergovernmental entity need to work with religions then? Some people ask that question. I trust you wouldn't, but some do. There are some very clear reasons for this. In a way, I don't need to tell you this because it would be preaching to the converted, but let's just go over those reasons together. Religious actors are actually social and cultural gatekeepers, norm and decision makers, setters in almost all societies. Any transformation in behaviors and attitudes, social and cultural norms, actually requires religious leaders and institutions to speak from their respective pulpits and to advocate for those changes. And only then are the changes possible to realize. This is based on plenty of evidence. Because you see, apart from Western Europe, the rest of the world, as you all know, has maintained faith and religions as a central part of what shapes people's thinking, behavior, and attitudes. For too long, however, the United Nations system has operated, and unfortunately still does, with a relatively Western European mindset. So it's an international organization with people from every single part of the world working in there. But the overall cultural ethos and operations in the United Nations happen to have a Western European mindset, which is why it took years of diligent, different efforts to bring to the awareness how and why religions mattered. We also know that religious institutions, whether they are, and here I refer specifically to churches, mosques, synagogues, temples, etc., they're the largest, oldest, and most far-reaching social service providers. So when we talk about social services today, the original providers were and still are, in most countries and societies around the world, religious institutions. Schools, clinics, hospitals, etc. Religious institutions and religiously inspired non-governmental organizations such as Caritas or CAFOD in the European context, World Vision, Islamic Relief, Bread for the World, these are all non-governmental organizations, are actually the first responders in humanitarian crises. They are already in situ in countries when crises that are either man-made or environmental strike. They don't have to be flown in, they're already there. And we know that at least 4 out of the top 10 global humanitarian non-governmental organizations are religiously inspired. We also know that religious leaders, in particular, in their capacity as leaders of major institutions and communities in many parts of the world, are actually heavily vested, and increasingly more publicly so, as partners, advisors of political actors. So this notion that you can divide the political and the religious institutions and spaces and actors is increasingly less and less realistic in our modern times. Now, we know, those of us who have studied know that this was always the case, actually. In the Ottoman or previous empires, there was a very, very close relationship between the religious and the political. But we thought we had secularized, effectively only Western Europe secularized, the rest of the world continued as is, thank you very much. And the truth is that today we look at certain presidents, I am living in the United States of America, or we look at certain heads of state in Russia, to name but one country, where the cohesion, collaboration between the religious leader and the political leader can be remarkably close. We also know that religious institutions, as well as many religiously affiliated or inspired non-governmental organizations, are amongst the most creatively self-resourced institutions. This has yet to be done extensive research on, but the point being maintained here is that the ethos of volunteering to serve one's church or one's mosque or one's otherwise faith community is very strong and leads to quite a bit of public servants, people who are volunteering their time, energy, and effort in a way that secular institutions do not quite inspire. That's a remarkable amount of human resources that religious institutions can rely upon and do in everywhere in the world. You also must not forget things like the presence of the Vatican Bank, Islamic finance, to name but a few of those mechanisms that are ultimately financial resources, but effectively very much religious entities. Now, last but by no means least, in terms of what religion has to do with it, if religions are sometimes identified as the source of challenging social norms, cultural norms, and sometimes even the source of terrorism and violence or extremism, and if religions are sort of used sometimes to be the reasons to either ignore international human rights or violate them, then how can religious actors not be a very critical part of the work of safeguarding the common good? If they're part of the problem, they need to be and absolutely have to be part of the solution. Now, There's a usual pushback to all of these different reasons I've given, which is to note that not all religious work is in accordance with human rights, and therefore, if it's not in accordance with human rights, it is not good. Debatable and can be discussed, not the theme of today. The point is, though, that the realms of religion are far bigger, far wider, and far more diverse than any other secular realms of human existence, and therefore cannot be ruled out. So if we talk about the global common good, religion, any one religion, is a very critical actor. Religious institutions, religious leaders are critical actors, but any one religion on its own cannot solve the problems of the whole. And this is the point that brings us to see that while we have an opportunity to continue to embed specific religious values in the service of the global common good, the tipping point may not necessarily be individual religious communities working individually, but has to be multiple faith communities working together with the secular counterparts and like-minded organizations. The COVID pandemic should have revealed many things, one of which is pertinent to the point I'm sharing here, which is that none of our existing infrastructure, political, religious, cultural, financial, in any one country is actually enough to deal with the multiple, interlinked, interconnected, and simultaneously escalating challenges. None of our existing infrastructures in any one country is sufficient to deal with even what goes on within the borders of the one country. Each of our institutions working in separate spaces in different ways is nowhere near enough to stem the tide, the simultaneity, and the complexity and the interconnectedness of the challenges that we are facing. So it's time for a different way of thinking and a different set of approaches now. I end with 3 key points or lessons. Whether it's the United Nations as the exemplar of secular global institutions or interfaith organizations working internationally, there is a challenge of working collaboratively within the United Nations system, between the United Nations and other actors, within interfaith organizations, and between different interfaith organizations. There is a challenge of working collaboratively. In my presentation, which is written, I explain and I argue this point more. But I want to share with you that this lesson isn't my lesson. This, in fact, is indeed shown. Why do you need 65 different United Nations system entities working on pretty much the same global challenges? And why do we need multiple interfaith organizations working on pretty much the same challenges? The second lesson that I reflect on is that no matter how well-intentioned, how inclusive, and sometimes even angelic the belief of any one faith tradition is, hosting all under the umbrella of any one faith will only underline the influence of that particular one. What am I talking about here? We now hear and see a plethora of interfaith initiatives, some hosted by Catholic, some hosted by Protestant, some hosted by Muslim Sunnah, some hosted by Muslim Shia, some hosted by different Jewish groups, each saying this is the interfaith space which we are hosting. And while that is commendable and heartwarming, I maintain that that's just not good enough. Because if I'm inviting you into my home, no matter who I'm inviting and how many I'm inviting and how diverse they are, it is still my home. And my home is my castle and my determination of how it would be run and what the real way of running it and believing is. In other words, one faith hosting all faiths to meet and to work together is beautiful. It's very noble. But you know what? It's probably a lot more egalitarian that an interfaith or multi-faith space hosts and enables and catalyzes multi-faith action, because at the end of the day, and this is the key third lesson, no one faith should be seen as trumping, it's a bad word these days, as better than any other. And that is the key to successful efforts of multi-faith to work towards the common good. If we're seeking somehow to show that my faith is the best there is and the only truth there is, and I will serve you out of it because I am the ultimate truth, I will invariably create an imbalanced power dynamic between me and others who may be from other faiths or others who may be of no faith in particular. But if I am genuine in my intention to collaborate and serve all, barring none, perhaps that should open my heart, my mind, and my approach to the fact that what you believe is your truth and your faith and your conviction may be just as good as mine. And that ultimately the real test is not so much in whether my faith tradition, whatever it is, can do a better job of serving because of my convictions or the convictions, but the real test is whether I'm able to stand alongside you shoulder to shoulder with a completely different belief system, but look into your eyes and serve alongside you, because that is where mercy happens. Mercy is in the multi-religious encounter of service to all. There is enough evidence from within different faith traditions that make this point and make it powerfully in ways that I will not be able to, but in my written statement, I have attempted to quote from different religious traditions this particular point, that as we believe, no matter what we believe, what it is termed, that our faithfulness in and of itself is manifesting mercy when I do not believe it is the only truth. But when I come together with you to serve alongside you, everyone, knowing that my truth is my truth, your truth is your truth, but as we serve all together, we will manifest the mercy that is the divine. The last quote from Alice in Wonderland is, "The best way to explain it is to do it," as you've all said in your remarkable presentations. So I come back to a point that I should have said way back, which is to congratulate each and all of you today for being merciful towards yourself, towards one another, and towards those you seek to serve. There is only one ask I would dare to make of you, if I may. You know how in the church services we are told to turn to the person next to us and offer greetings of peace? I would ask you to please keep in mind to turn to your fellow sister or brother of another faith in your neighborhood, in your community, in your nation, and offer greetings of peace through an invitation to partner with you in working to serve all. I can tell you based on experience, it isn't easy. You know this better than I. I can honestly say that sometimes actually it will be deeply painful. For as we invite and open our hearts to serve and to serve together, we become per definition more vulnerable. And not all people of faith will reciprocate the respect and the appreciation and the honoring of our respective vulnerabilities. Some may even become fearful. Some will misunderstand. Some may even become resentful, suspicious, and hurtful. But serving the common good rooted in our faithful convictions is about persistence. Mercy does not always meet mercy. But when it meets pain, it perseveres. And this is as it should be, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Azza, for those inspiring words to our Mercy Global Action Emerging Leaders Fellowship. I now invite Sister Angela Reid, Head of Mercy Global Action, to respond to the keynote.
At the end of that presentation, I heard someone behind me saying, wow, and indeed, wow. Professor Karam, your virtual presence here today is an honour and a privilege. Thank you so much for your powerful and challenging address today. When we were discerning who to invite to give the keynote address, your name came readily to mind as a woman who would impart the message of solidarity, both in your words and your very being, to our women leaders as they bring the formal process of the Mercy Global Action Emerging Leaders Fellowship to completion this morning. Azza, I recall the day you were invited to deliver the keynote address. I was overwhelmed when you promptly responded with a resounding yes. We thank you for your generosity. The Mouth team's encounters with you since then have always been grace-filled, knowing that as a woman of faith, we share a common vision, a world in which peace reigns, and one in which earth and humans can flourish. This morning, you have opened up a myriad of images for us and provided us with many challenges. As a scholar of religion and politics, and indeed a veteran or a wounded veteran, as you say, of the United Nations system, you have shared a wealth of knowledge and experience with us today. But what profoundly struck me this morning is that you are a woman of deep faith who has been leading in a strong, inclusive, warm and supportive way for many years. Today, you have called us to not only look out beyond the horizon to respond to the needs of our time, but to look inwardly and be aware of the ways in which we operate and lead. And Professor Karam, although you have recently finished in your role of Secretary-General of Religions for Peace, we know that under your leadership, you advanced the multi-religious imperative of engagement and collaboration of and with religious actors in addressing issues such as climate change, environmental degradation, and gender equality. As a woman, you have shone a light on exemplary leadership, recognising that society as a whole benefits when women reach their full potential. You foster transformative leadership from the grassroots to the global table. As we heard today, you identify the challenges we face in leadership and maintain a strong conviction of the need to surmount barriers in order to empower religious leaders. And you recognise these women leaders in front of us as agents of change. To the fellows, as you leave here today as graduates of the Mercy Global Action Fellowship, you walk in the light of many women who have gone before you. Professor Karam, today we thank you for the guiding light that you have been and give thanks for your enduring leadership. And I've invited one of our graduates, Stella, a graduating fellow, to pray this blessing on you today. And by way of inclusion, I ask everyone to extend a hand of blessing.
Let's take a moment of silence as we say this prayer of blessing. Blessed are you who bear the light in unbearable times, who testify to its endurance amid the unendurable, who bear witness to its persistence when everything seems in shadow and grief. Blessed are you in whom the light lives, in whom the brightness blazes. Your heart is a chapel, an altar where in the deepest night can be seen the fire that shines forth in you. In an uncountable faith, in stubborn hope, in love that illuminates every broken thing it finds. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Angela and Francisco. I now invite Michelle Vaughan to read the cohort 2 month statement again. Darwin Ricardo to read it in Soprano, and Sarah Brown in Spanish. And the whole members of cohort 2, Mercy Global Action Emerging Leaders, will collectively read the statement.
Corja. Is Kianri Throgranwich, Florsha, San Exula, Agus Pashinta, Queen Yarthas. The Spirit Katlina Macaulay, Eshtamich, Agus Thugamich, Ador, the Winship Comminia, Agus Shapsamich, and New Farthiat, Western Down, Agus a Winship Galair, Gahariha, Deep Shoe, Arvina, and Malou. Hermitage Shock, or Corish Latranaka. Agastakanich, Le Fragre, Ivanaha. Lashti, Dorgo, Exana, Uhula, Thropra, Gurla.
Kami ang mga liberes sa Mercy, abunda sa nagkadaiyang kultura o madasigong ubarog sa hustisya. Sa panag-ingnan ni Catherine McCauley, kami mamati, magpasidungo sa dignidad o nagbarog sa panaghiusang uban sa kinaiyakan o sa tanang katawan na binasa mga sinagin. Tuyuon na mo nga mubabag sa mga madaog-daogong sistema ug nagapalapnag sa mga malungtarong solusyon diya sa konteksto sa Mercy.
Somos líderes de la misericordia, con riqueza en la diversidad y pasión por las instituciones. En el espíritu de Catalina McCauley, escuchamos, honramos la dignidad y nos solidarizamos con nuestra tierra y con toda su gente, especialmente con los marginados. Desbaratamos intencionadamente los sistemas opresivos y abogamos por soluciones sostenibles a través de nuestros contextos singulares de la misericordia.
We are blessed believers, rich in diversity, in the spirit of Catholic we exist, honor the unity of, and stand in our life, the treasure of
Thank you for those inspiring words. In a moment, we will award the certificates. This is what we will gather here to witness. It's a joyous occasion, a sacred moment. So, on behalf of the fellows, I ask you to join me in giving these leaders their moment to rejoice. We will wait to celebrate loudly till all names have been read, so each name can be heard by those who are here to support them. I now invite Sheila Carney, Chair of Mercy International Association Board of Directors, to read the names of the fellows. And Sister Patricia O'Donovan to award the certificates for the fellows to be assisted by Dr. Andy Reid. Fellows, once your name is called, please come to the front to receive your graduation certificate.
Our first graduate this morning is Sister Mary Josephine Gorman of the Sisters of Mercy of the Americas in California, United States of America. Her research project was Big Rivers, Metaphors for the World We Live In. Rebecca Rathbone of Ontario, Canada, whose research project was Translating Mental Health Treatment. Sister Derby Mercado, Sister of Mercy of the Americas from Mindanao in the Philippines. Her research project was Public Branding of Church Leaders in Active Community Service, the Role of the Church. Dominique Merende of Sydney, Australia, whose research was on harvesting solutions, examining the relationship between population growth and sustainable food systems. Sarah Brown of North Carolina, United States of America, whose research project was Nonviolent Practice as Love, honoring dignity and interconnectedness of earth and all, of each and all. Stella Mathe Waimatha of Nairobi, Kenya. Her research project was the influence of the Food for Education program on needy children in primary public schools within the Mukuru slums, Nairobi. Gabriella Kinsman of Adelaide, Australia, whose research was Learning Beyond Borders. How can we pave pathways of lifelong learning for forcibly displaced people? Paula Anamani Alapia, Sisters of Mercy of New Zealand, in Wellington, New Zealand, who researched women at the forefront of climate change. Musa, who researched suicide, the silence we share.
Leaders Fellowship. Now invite graduating fellow Paula Anami Elgila to give a vote of thanks on behalf of fellows.
Tēnila Forte, kia ora, tāna palava, and warm greetings to each and everyone. A warm welcome to those who are joining us online. It is a great honor and great privilege for me to say a few words of acknowledgement on behalf of our Cohort 2 fellow. I would like to acknowledge our God, who is the center of our lives. I acknowledge this sacred ground of which I am standing, the very ground where our foundress, Catherine Macaulay, started her work of mercy, the place where the vulnerable and the marginalized at Catherine's time was called a place of courage and a place of hope. The place where our Mercy sisters and Mercy associates all around the globe are called our Mercy home. I would like to acknowledge our loved ones, sisters, family members, and friends who have recently returned to God, knowing their spirits are with us here today. As our transformative journey as fellows come to a close, we are filled with immense gratitude and a sense of profound accomplishment. It is with great joy and appreciation that we take this opportunity to extend our heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you who have played an integral role in shaping our fellowship experience. To the MELF team, Sister Angela Reid, the head of Mercy Global Action, and your team, your unwavering support and dedication have been the bedrock of this fellowship. Your belief in us has inspired and empowered us to overcome challenges and strive for excellence. To our donor, our words are not enough to express our sincere thanks for your generosity and support for all of us Mercy leaders. We are deeply grateful for your encouragement and for making this life-changing opportunity possible for us. May the God of generosity continue to bless you and your family. We acknowledge the support of Mercy International Association through our CEO, Sister Patricia O'Donovan, and Mercy Global Action. Your commitment to social justice and mercy-driven initiatives have been an inspirational throughout our fellowship. Your work has broadened our perspectives and ignited a passion within us to create a positive impact on society. To our mentors and facilitators, your wisdom, guidance, and invaluable insights have enriched our learning experience beyond measure. Your willingness to share your expertise and journey has been an exceptional gift that we will always cherish.
To the interns and supporting staff, your tireless efforts behind the scenes have made our experiences smooth and enjoyable. Your dedication has not gone unnoticed, and we are grateful for the positive atmosphere you created throughout our fellowship. We cannot overlook the pivotal role played by our family, our friends, and our congregations that supported us during this journey. Your unconditional love, encouragement, and understanding have been the pillars of strength that kept us motivated during these challenging times. Thank you for standing by us and celebrating our success with such warmth and enthusiasm. Additionally, we extend our special and heartfelt thank you to our fellow participants who have become more than just colleagues. They have become lifelong friends and companions on this transformative journey. Your unwavering support and shared experiences have made this fellowship even more meaningful and memorable. Together we have laughed, learned, and overcome challenges, creating a bond that will endure far beyond conclusion of this program. The diversity of perspectives and talents each of you brought to the table enriched our discussions and broadened our horizons, leaving our indelible mark on our growth as individuals and as a united group. We are grateful for the cherished memories and the enduring friendships forged during this time, and we eagerly anticipated to continue in that we will collectively make on the world. Thank you for being an integral part of this extraordinary journey with us. As we continue our mercy journey into the world as transformed individuals, carrying Catherine Macaulay's charism, we remember her words. Our hearts can always be in the same place, centered on God. As our Professor Azza stated in her speech today, mercy is a multiple religions that serves others. May God's blessing shine upon us until we meet again. Part-time.
We now invite the Milf team, Sister Angela Reid, Marietta Matanio, Tyler Barnes, and Colleen Swade to lead us in our closing prayer.
Women's Creed. We believe in the goodness and value of women, our strength and sanity, our willingness to weep, our capacity to support each other. Instead of being rivals, the ability to cope with children's demands and demands of life, our willingness and ability to get on with each other, our spirituality, and our beliefs, flowing with life, birth, and death.
We affirm the story of women as the story of humankind, food gatherers and farmers, child bearers and teachers, pioneers and policy makers, homemakers and factory workers, parents, scientists, doctors, domestic workers and economists, givers of life and flavors of art, unpaid hidden workers at home, and paid members of the workplace outside. We rejoice in our diversity and versatility, our intuition and our logic.
We confess our failures, frailties, and imperfections, including our past acceptance of violence and injustice in relationships between men and women and between races. We look toward to the future in faith and hope, working for the day when we and all our sisters no longer have to fit a stereotype, but are free to use our gifts and share in all the benefits of human life and work. We look forward to the age of peace, when violence is banished, when both women and men are able to love and be loved, and the work and wealth of our world is justly shared.
We believe that our future depends on us, but that all the forces of good, love, peace, and justice, all the creative powers of the universe, work with us to achieve this vision. May it come soon. Amen.
Thank you. Let us congratulate the graduates one more time. On behalf of the Mersey International Association, I thank everyone for attending today and taking part in this wonderful ceremony. I would like to acknowledge Sister Patricia O'Donovan and Sister Mary Cox for the beautiful music for this graduation. Thank you very much, Patricia. I would also like to thank those operating the IT and Zoom, Cecilia Kerr and Colleen Swain. We're deeply grateful for your expertise. Finally, I would like to thank Sister Catherine Manning, who has so ably translated in Spanish this ceremony. Many thanks to you, of course, and of course a big thank you to those who are supporting here in person and those online. Blessings to you all.